Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. As a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia, I want to discuss some of the core concepts behind the Governor-General's speech. The Governor-General spoke about the need for government to provide the environment in which people can produce and thrive. What I will do today, Mr Acting Deputy President, is present basic facts and let the people decide themselves. Let the people make their verdict. And I want to focus in particular on our country's productive capacity. That is what will keep us going in the future unless we continue to destroy it, which has been the case for the last 20 years. There are three issues that I really focus on. Cost of living, and in that is the energy costs. We went from being the lowest electricity prices in the world to the world's highest. The second aspect of cost of living is taxation, and the third aspect is economic mismanagement that is paid for by every person in this country. The second topic is security, and in that I want to talk about immigration. And the third point I want to talk about is future building, the productive capacity of the future of our country, the productive capacity that our children and grandchildren will inherit. But in addition to cost of living, security and future building, there is some fundamental need to address governance, restore governance in this country and restore sovereignty. And I will quote from a former well-regarded Liberal Premier on that. And underneath it all, I want to discuss freedom and rights. But first, some basic comments, because listening to the government, one would think they did well at the last election. They didn't do well. Bill Shorten did poorly. The Senate is directly elected, and therefore there is no House of Representatives mandate standing over us. There is an arrogance in the government that thinks they have a mandate. They have a mandate in the House of Representatives, but this is the House of Review, and this House is known for standing up for the people. We represent the people of our state. Every one of us in here should be representing the people of our state. And yet, the people of the states do not trust Liberal Labor. Let's have a look at the last election. In Queensland, in the Senate, the Liberal Party got 38.9% of the vote. In the House of Representatives, 43.7%. Across Australia, the Liberal Party got 41.4%. It was actually 1% lower than the election result in 2016 under Malcolm Turnbull's leadership. People don't know that. The Liberal Party went backwards in terms of total vote across the country. The Labor Party, and this is where some real shocks are coming, in the Senate in Queensland was 22.6%. House of Representatives in Queensland, 26.7%. And across Australia, 33.3%. One Nation was 10.3% in the Senate, or almost half of Labor, 8.9% in the House of Representatives, and 3.1% across Australia. The United Australia Party, despite spending millions, tens of millions of dollars, managed 3.4%. Liberal Labor combined won 61.5% of the vote in the Senate in Queensland. That's under two-thirds. They won 70.4% in the House of Representatives. And across Australia, 74.7% voted for the Liberal or Labor Party. One quarter didn't. But in the Senate, almost 40% of voters in Queensland voted for someone other than Liberal-Labor duopoly. And almost 1 1/3 voted for someone other than the Liberal-Labor duopoly in the House of Representatives. And here's why. Because the productive capacity of our country is being decimated by the Liberal-Labor duopoly. The government, under Liberal and Labor parties, has inflicted disaster in energy policies, in agriculture, and that's directly affecting the cost of living, state and federal. I'm talking about Liberal and Labor, not just federal. Are people aware? Yes, they are. Are people in this parliament aware? I don't think so. Let's have a look at some of the things that have driven farmers to despair, and I mean despair. Queensland through to the Murray-Darling Basin in Victoria, all the eastern states. Let's have a look at number one, property rights. They have been stolen under the leadership of the John Howard government in 1996 and a deal done with the Rob Borbidge National Party government to steal farmers' property rights. Why? To comply with the United Nations Kyoto Protocol. And it had no data underpinning that protocol, justifying its existence and justifying the Howard government's stealing of private property rights. What's more, those property rights were stolen in direct contravention of the Constitution by going around the Constitution. So instead of giving just terms compensation to farmers, they stole farmers' property rights by getting the state governments to do it. Peter Beattie is on record as admitting that. Bob Carr is on record publicly as admitting that. So Liberal Labor Party colluded at state and federal level to steal farmers' property rights. And right now, up in Charleville, there is a man, Dan McDonald, fighting through the courts because he has been branded a criminal for feeding his cattle as a result of legislation that has been enabled by the Liberal Labor duopoly. That is destroying the productive capacity. And we call for restoration of those property rights or compensation. Not only Dan McDonald, Sharon Lose, another farmer, being decimated by state government extrapolation of those property rights theft. Peter Spencer, who knows about that man who almost died protesting the Liberal Party stealing of property rights. And the second topic affecting agriculture, water, or should I say the lack of water, driven by the UN's Rio Declaration, again foreign imposed, signed up though by Paul Keating's government in this occasion, Labor Party. Again, UN, again, no data backing it up. Again, Liberal and Labor continue to implement the policy, destroying our productive capacity. We know of people, Louise Burge, Chris Brooks, Graham Pyle in southern New South Wales, whose livelihoods are being threatened because of a lack of water due to the mismanagement and, dare I say it, the corruption that's across the Murray-Darling Basin as a result of policies driven by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. Then we have energy. Now, there is nothing more important than energy when it comes to modern society. Since the 1850s, we've seen a relentless decrease in the price of electricity, price of energy. Relentless decrease thanks to technology. Until about 10 years ago. And now 10 to 15 years ago, and we've seen a doubling of electricity prices. The thing that's given us our material welfare, our material well-being rather, our standard of living, our ever-increasing wealth until recently has been ever cheaper energy. And now the UN is having deliberate policy of increasing electricity prices, increasing fuel prices, increasing gas prices. And Liberal and Labor are doing it based upon the UN's Kyoto Protocol. Again, no data justifying it. We now have a situation where farmers in Queensland, southern Queensland, central Queensland, northern Queensland are not growing fodder in a serious drought because they can't afford to pump the water due to electricity prices. I can think of someone named Debbie Gibson up north who told me of her problems when I was listening to farmers in Townsville just 2 weeks ago. Then we have the ridiculous situation of carbon farming, tying up land, making it possible to become the habitat of feral animals and noxious weeds. And that means extra costs for neighbouring farmers because of the extra management of those feral animals and noxious weeds. Carbon farming, again based upon the UN's Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. Again, no data. Again, pushed by the Liberal and Labor parties. Again, destroying the productive capacity of our vital industries. Kate Stewart and others are being hurt by this. And now we see in Queensland soil runoff and chemical runoff laws that are not based upon data, that are again complying with the UN's Kyoto Protocol, the UN's Rio de Janeiro Declaration. Again, Liberal and Labor have been pushing this. This is a Labor extension of it, destroying productive capacity. And I think about the member from Morani, Steve Andrew, who has been doing wonderful work with his cane growers up there in offsetting this and trying to come up with a far better solution, but no one's listening amongst the government. Many cane growers have recycle pits to catch and reuse the water. It doesn't run off their property. Why would they want it to run off their property when it's so valuable? But the bureaucrats in the Labor Party assume that all land from Cairns to Bundaberg to Tweed is the same and use the same quantity of fertiliser. And who's paying for this? The people in the supermarkets are paying for this. The farmers' families are paying for this. And then we see fishing. The UN's Rio de Janeiro Declaration in 1992, again signed, as I said, by Paul Keating's government. No data, but Liberal and Labor parties pushing it, destroying the productive capacity. We now have the world's largest continental shelf fishing zone, and yet yet we import 3/4 of the seafood our people in Australia consume. And I'm thinking of people like Timsy, who have to deal with the bureaucrats, deal with faulty electronics imposed upon them by the government, and deal with faulty regulations that are trapping them, needlessly for no benefit for the Barrier Reef. Then I think about forestry and visiting and listening to forestry workers and associated people at Maryborough recently, where they had a big protest, very well-attended protest. Again, based upon the UN's Rio Declaration, again based on no data, again pushed by the Liberal Labor parties, again destroying our productive capacity. Think of families like Brett and his wife. And then I raise the issue of trigger mapping. Now this is bureaucracy gone mad. Lang Park, a stadium in Brisbane, now supposedly, according to the government's trigger mapping, a site for valuable species threatened with extinction. All done to control land. And Bruce Wagner has been doing this voluntarily for years. He's gone out and he's got the government's data and exposed it. What I want to say, I will quote next from a book called Rebuilding the Federation by former Premier of Western Australia, Richard Court, who wrote this book in 1994. And I'll quote him here. The driving feature of Commonwealth state financial relations is the state's heavy reliance on Commonwealth funding to supplement their own source revenue. Currently, remember this is 1994, the states receive approximately 50% of their total revenue from the Commonwealth. And with that funding comes strings, restrictions. So who's running the states? In many ways, it is now the federal government. Whether it's Liberal or Labor, doesn't seem to matter in many areas because there is so little accountability in the federal arena. So we also see Richard Court go on, and this is the point I want to make. This is what is destroying our country's productive capacity, and our children and their grandchildren will be paying for this. Quoting again from Richard Court, the Commonwealth is using the external affairs power to govern Australian citizens, often rushing to sign international covenants which trample on their existing rights. These agreements are made primarily by people outside Australia. The terms and conditions are set by officials from other countries. While Australia takes part in the negotiations, it does not exercise a dominant influence. The foreign countries do. We never see them, we never meet them, and we cannot question them. And then he goes on to discuss the process. But let me quote from Maurice Strong, the founder and the first Secretary-General of the United Nations Environmental Programme, a corrupt and destructive political force masquerading as an environmental force. He signed off in his introduction, the foreword to the Earth Summit, Agenda 21, the United Nations Programme of Action from Rio. I quote from the last paragraph of his foreword. Maurice Strong, the first Secretary-General of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. There is much to be done, and I look to the new United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development to be the focal point for the massive effort needed to create the new era of international cooperation, the new global partnership that will make this shift possible. And then Maurice Strong, then in the introduction they say, the UN's Agenda 21 stands as a comprehensive blueprint for action to be taken globally from now into the 21st century, and that's what Agenda 21 stands for, 21st century global governance. 21st century agenda by governments, United Nations organisations, development agencies, non-governmental organisations and independent sector groups in every area in which human activity impacts on the environment. The agenda should be studied in conjunction with both the Rio Declaration, which provides a context for its specific proposals, and the Statement of Forest Principles. That is the blueprint right there. And then we've seen Canada evaluate the United Nations Agenda 21 and saying that there are reasons for undertaking this analysis of Agenda 21 with threefold. First, because the document, the Agenda 21 document, is so lengthy, complex and complicated, there was a need to understand the terms of Agenda 21, the interrelationships between the different themes and sectors and types of programs or activities which were advocated and agreed to by the negotiators of Agenda 21. What I'm saying to that is that even the Canadians who drove a lot of it can see that the Agenda 21 is so complex that people don't understand. Many people in this House, many people in the House of Representatives do not even know of Agenda 21, yet are pushing regulations through that are enabling Agenda 21. Maurice Strong said he had two objectives, Mr. Acting Deputy President, and that was to deindustrialise Western civilisation and to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. We see, let's continue to energy. And I talked a minute ago about the primacy of energy. John Howard's government made three massive changes. First of all, he brought in the renewable energy target at 2%. It's now at 14%. The Liberal Party, National Party, wanted to take it to 28%. It's already crippling our electricity prices and they want to double it. The Labor Party want to quadruple it. And the Greens, as Lenin said, the useful idiots for the United Nations, the Greens want to make it 100% renewable energy. And it can't be done without subsidies. It's already destroying our electricity prices and making them the highest in the world. The second thing, with regard to electricity prices, we have the gold plating of the networks, poles and wires, because they've now been turned into corporations, not state government departments. And corporations are there to make profits and provide a return which is simply a tax to the state government. We have the retailers guaranteed returns. And what do? Just clip the ticket as it goes through so that the public can pay even more for their electricity. Then we have the national electricity market, brought in place by Liberal and Labor, which is open to gaming and is being gamed, and open to gouging and is being gouged, or rather the taxpayers are gouged. We now have subsidies to some of the world's largest companies for installing solar panels in our country, installing wind turbines in our country, subsidies that we pay in higher electricity prices. So we export our natural gas, we export our other energy and coal, and we send it to China and other countries, and they send it back as wind turbines and send it back as solar panels. And then we pay Chinese companies, for example, in the case of Goldwind, to install these things and to take up valuable farming land to do so. So we're destroying our productive capacity. We're putting in place high productivity agricultural land is being destroyed, being turned into a wasteland. And we're now putting in place low energy density solar panels, low energy density wind complexes, and that is raising prices of electricity. It is unavoidable. It will continue to raise prices of electricity. What's more, we're paying the Chinese to do this, and I've got nothing against the Chinese for trying to do that. We're the stupid ones doing it. In 1942, the Japanese bombed Darwin. The Prime Minister at the time, John Curtin, did not send a cheque to the Japanese saying, "Thanks for destroying our productive capacity. Let's help you pay for the bombs." But that is what we're doing to the Chinese companies in here, destroying our capacity. What we will do as One Nation is make sure that the public continues to hear about the destruction under the Liberal-Labor duopoly, the destruction of our productive capacity. We will continue to take the action that's needed to protect that capacity. We will say the things that need to be said and do the things that need to be done. We will speak up and serve Australia because we love our country. We love Australia, and we love the people here, and One Nation will work to bring back Australia's productive capacity. Thank you, Mr. Acting Deputy President.
Senator